The world knows her as a legend, but at 71, Oprah Winfrey's private heartbreak tells a very different story. She is one of the most recognized faces on earth, a billionaire, a philanthropist, a symbol of triumph and transformation. To millions, she is the voice of wisdom, the woman who can soothe pain with a single sentence. But even the brightest lights cast shadows. For decades, the world has celebrated her as the woman who has it all: power, influence, and a story that inspires generations. Yet behind the applause, behind the cameras, lies a truth few truly understand. Oprah's life has never been as perfect as it appeared. Born into poverty in rural Mississippi, Oprah's childhood was marked not by comfort, but by survival. Abuse, loss, and loneliness were her earliest companions. She grew up in a world where her voice was often silenced, and where dreams felt like impossible luxuries. The world saw a savior, someone who gave others the courage to speak, to heal, to rise. But what they didn't see was the weight she carried, the wounds she still tried to mend beneath the surface of her global success. A mantra she lived by, not as a slogan, but as a survival strategy. Each episode, each conversation, was another step in her own quiet therapy, an attempt to make sense of the pain that once defined her. The paradox of Oprah Winfrey is not in her fame, it's in her fragility. The girl who once owned nothing became the woman who could buy the world. And yet, deep inside, she remained haunted by the echoes of what she had lost along the way. The cameras captured her triumphs, but when the lights went out, she was left with the one person she could never fully escape: herself. This is the woman the world thinks it knows, but doesn't. The woman who built an empire out of empathy, yet still wrestles with the ache of her own humanity. Behind every headline, every accolade, every billion-dollar milestone, there's a deeper story, one of resilience born from pain, and greatness forged in the quiet fires of suffering. This is where her story truly begins. Before the lights, before the fame, before the applause, there was a little girl named Oprah Gail Winfrey, born on a cold January day in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, a town most people never heard of, and a name most would never forget. She was born into poverty so deep it clung to everything: the walls, the air, the silence. Her mother, Vernita Lee, was barely more than a child herself, struggling to make ends meet. Her father, Vernon Winfrey, lived miles away. And so, little Oprah's earliest world was one of absence, of waiting for love that never seemed to come. She learned pain before she learned words. When other children were being sung to sleep, Oprah was being taught the language of struggle, through hunger, through loneliness, through the sharp sting of discipline that sometimes went too far.
When Oprah Winfrey boarded that bus to Nashville, she wasn't just leaving a place, she was escaping a past. 14 years old, heartbroken, carrying more pain than any child should. But somewhere inside her, beneath the bruises, beneath the silence, there was still a spark that refused to die. Her father, Vernon Winfrey, lived there, a strict man, a barber by trade, a disciplinarian by nature. He gave Oprah something her chaotic childhood had never offered: structure. There were rules, there were books, there was expectation. Vernon Winfrey believed in education and order. He told his daughter, "You can't climb if you don't read. You can't lead if you don't think." It was tough love, but it was the first real love she had ever known. And in the middle of this new discipline, something began to happen. The shy, wounded girl started to speak in class, in church, in debate clubs. Her voice, once silenced by fear, began to take shape, confident, commanding, magnetic. Her teacher saw it first, the way she could hold a room, the way her words carried weight far beyond her years. And soon, the world would hear it too. At just 17, Oprah landed a part-time job at WVOL, a local radio station in Nashville. It was supposed to be simple, reading community announcements, delivering the news. But the moment her voice hit the microphone, it was as if the universe paused to listen. Listeners didn't just hear her, they felt her. Her words carried emotion, warmth, the rare ability to make even strangers feel seen. And in that small studio, surrounded surrounded by dusty vinyl records and cigarette smoke, Oprah found her calling. For the first time, her pain had purpose. Her story had sound. Each broadcast was more than news. It was a whisper to the world. I'm here. I exist. I matter. The little girl from Mississippi, once silenced by fear, was now shaping her destiny through the power of her voice. The dust of her past was still on her shoes, but her eyes were fixed on something higher, something brighter. From pain came purpose. From silence, a voice, and that voice was just beginning to change the world. When Oprah Winfrey first stepped onto the set of AM Chicago, no one could have predicted what was about to happen. The show was struggling. Ratings were low. The city's audience had moved on. But then came Oprah, a burst of empathy, intelligence, and authenticity that television had never seen before. Within months, the numbers soared. Viewers felt something new, a host who listened, not just talked. By 1986, AM Chicago was reborn as The Oprah Winfrey Show, and television would never be the same again. The crown of fame had found its queen. She was no longer the girl from Mississippi or the teenager from Nashville. She was Oprah, a one-name phenomenon. Her words moved nations. Her tears mirrored the countries. Her couch became a sanctuary for the broken and the hopeful alike. But behind every camera angle, behind every perfectly timed smile, there was another story, one of exhaustion, pressure, and loneliness. Fame gave her everything she had once dreamed of, and yet it demanded everything in return. Every day, millions looked to her for guidance, healing, hope. But when the lights dimmed, she was left with her own unhealed wounds, the ghosts of childhood pain that no award or applause could erase. She carried the weight of the world's confessions, absorbing the heartbreak of strangers while burying her own. She was America's counselor, its confessor, its voice of reason, and yet she often found herself asking, "Who listens to me?" Behind the empire, there was still that same fragile girl who once read Bible verses to escape her pain. Only now, her escape was televised. With every success came new expectation to be perfect, to be strong, to never falter. The world didn't just admire her, it depended on her. And that, perhaps, was the heaviest crown of all. Still, Oprah never stopped showing up. Every morning, she walked into that studio and gave the world her light, even when her own felt dim. Because for Oprah, fame was never about power, it was about purpose. And even as it weighed her down, she wore it with grace. The crown of fame had made her untouchable, but it had also made her human. Painfully, beautifully human. In 1998, at the very height of her fame, Oprah Winfrey set out to create something different. Something that wasn't just entertainment, but legacy. A story about trauma, redemption, and the ghosts that haunt a soul long after freedom is won. That story was Beloved. For Oprah, Beloved wasn't just a movie. It was her heart made visible. A film about pain, love, and survival. She poured $80 million and years of her life into it. She believed this was her masterpiece, her offering to history. The work that would prove she was more than just a talk show host. When Beloved premiered, she stood tall, confident, expectant, ready to be embraced by the world. But when the lights came up, the silence was deafening. America chose a killer doll over her dream. The reviews were mixed. The audiences didn't come. Her masterpiece, her message, the story she had carried in her soul for years, ignored. Oprah would later admit that it broke something inside her. For months, she couldn't get out of bed. The woman who told millions how to heal, now couldn't heal herself. She had faced public failure before, but never like this. This time, it was personal. Every line of dialogue, every frame of film was a piece of her heart, and the world had shrugged. I fell into a fog. I thought, maybe I wasn't who I believed I was. In that fog, she found herself haunted, not by the ghosts of Beloved, but by her own reflection. Fame had promised healing, validation, safety, but instead, it magnified every wound. It made every failure public, every pain headline news. She had built an empire of empathy, but even empathy couldn't shield her from humiliation. But even in that darkness, something within her refused to die, because pain, for Oprah, was never the end. It was the teacher. She learned that dreams come with a price, and sometimes that price is heartbreak. Beloved didn't break her story, it deepened it. It reminded her that greatness isn't measured by applause, but by the courage to try again after silence. The dream had cost her, but the woman who rose from the ashes of Beloved would become even stronger, because every heartbreak, every fall was simply the price of being Oprah. To the world, Oprah Winfrey was the embodiment of confidence, the woman who made others believe in their power, their worth, their light. But beneath the applause, beneath the weight of the crown, her body carried a pain words could never fully tell. She once said, "It's not about the food, it's about filling a hole that nothing else can fill." That hole was carved by years of loneliness, shame, and survival, and for decades, she tried to fill it with work, with success, with the next big achievement. But the body never forgets. The press made her pain public property. Every pound gained, every dress size changed, dissected, and broadcasted for the world to judge. But what they didn't see was that her struggle was not just physical, it was spiritual. She fought not only with her reflection, but with the ghosts of her past. The young girl who had been hurt, silenced, and unseen was still inside her, and every time she tried to quiet that voice with food or achievement or control, it found new ways to scream.
When she underwent knee surgery, she called it her body's wake-up call. Years of pushing herself, of carrying the emotional weight of millions, had finally broken through her physical strength. She said, "I realized I'd been carrying everyone else's pain, but never truly healing my own." Her journey through health became another lesson, not about perfection, but about compassion. The same compassion she offered others, she had to learn to give to herself. It was here, in her 70s, that Oprah began to understand. The body remembers what the heart tries to forget. Every scar, every ache, every failed diet, it all told a story, her story. And maybe the real battle was never about weight. It was about acceptance. Accepting that even the strongest among us are allowed to hurt, allowed to be imperfect. Because behind the billionaire, the icon, the queen of talk, was always a woman, still learning to love the reflection staring back at her. And as she finally began to heal her body, she discovered something far deeper, the peace that comes when the soul no longer has to hide. Fame gave Oprah Winfrey the world, but it also took something from her, something no fortune, no award could ever replace. Because when the cameras stopped rolling and the crowds went home, she faced the one truth that money could never protect her from: loss. She was the girl who came from nothing and somehow built an empire. But in building that empire, she watched the world she came from slowly fade away. One by one, the faces of her past disappeared, until she was the only one left still standing. Her younger brother, Jeffrey, was the first. He died of AIDS in 1989, a time when shame and silence surrounded the disease. Oprah rarely spoke about it publicly, not because she didn't love him, but because grief doesn't always find words. She later said, "It taught me compassion in a way nothing else could. Watching someone you love fade away changes you." Then came the pain of her half-sister, Patricia. Addiction pulled her into darkness, and the bond they might have shared was lost to chaos. Oprah tried to help, but some people you can't save, not because you don't love them, but because they've stopped believing they deserve to be saved. Patricia died in 2003, and then there were her parents. Vernita Lee, the mother who gave birth to her at just 18, the woman whose love Oprah spent a lifetime trying to understand. She passed away quietly in 2018. Then her father, Vernon Winfrey, the man whose discipline, structure, and stern love had once saved her from a path of destruction. He died in 2022. When the news came, Oprah didn't release a statement of grandeur. She didn't give a grand speech. She simply said, "He knew how much I loved him." And maybe that was all that mattered. For all her power, all her influence, grief became the one thing she couldn't out-talk, outwork, or outshine. It was quiet, heavy, personal, because in the end, she realized she had outlived the people who once knew her, before the fame, before the wealth, before the world called her Oprah. The girl from Kosciuszko, Mississippi, was now alone in a world she built from her own strength. And that is the tragedy of greatness. When the lights dim, when the applause fades, and you've outlasted every voice that once called you home, you're left with memories and a silence that even the world's most powerful voice cannot fill. In a world obsessed with fairy tales, where love is proven by diamond rings and white dresses, Oprah Winfrey wrote her own story. It didn't begin with "I do." It began with understanding, a love that didn't need ownership, a bond that refused to be defined by tradition. She met Stedman Graham in 1986, the same year the Oprah Winfrey Show took flight. He was calm where she was fire, grounded where she was storm. From the start, the world expected a wedding. The headlines called him Oprah's man. The tabloids waited for a ring that never came. But Oprah, she never followed the script. She once said, "If we had married, we'd probably not be together now." Because for Oprah, love wasn't about possession. It was about peace. She had lived too long under other people's control to ever surrender her freedom again. For nearly 40 years, they've stood side by side. Quiet, loyal, constant. No marriage license, no shared last name. Just an unspoken promise. You and I, in our own way, on our own terms.
But beneath the strength of that choice lies something tender and a little sad, because deep inside the woman who conquered the world was once a girl who dreamed of a home filled with laughter, children, and the smell of Sunday dinner. She once admitted, "If I had kids, they would hate me. They would end up on the news saying, 'I don't know where my mother was.'" It was her honest reckoning with the price of ambition. Oprah chose her calling over convention, and in doing so, she gave the world her voice, but not her lineage. And though she often says she feels no regret, her eyes sometimes tell a quieter truth, that somewhere in the folds of her success lies a small ache for what might have been. Through the years, Stedman has remained her anchor, steady, patient, never demanding more than she could give. He once said, "She knows who she is. That's what I love about her." In the end, their love story isn't about what was missing. It's about what endured. It's proof that love doesn't need a ring to be real, or a vow to be lasting. It can live quietly in the space between two souls, free, faithful, and forever. For most of her life, Oprah Winfrey ran from the pain of her childhood, from the ghosts of poverty, from the echoes of loneliness that whispered through every stage of her success. But eventually, she found a place where she didn't need to run anymore. They call it Montecito, a land of sun, silence, and space. To Oprah, it became more than an estate. It became sanctuary, a place where the Mississippi girl, the one who once slept on a porch because there was no room inside, could finally rest. She often says the land speaks to her. The trees, the wind, the earth beneath her feet. They remind her of how far she's come. From red Mississippi dirt roads to California gardens that bloom under her care, every acre tells a story of healing. It's here that she learned peace isn't given, it's cultivated, the same way she built everything else in her life, by hand,
by heart, and by faith. And perhaps that's the most powerful part of her journey, because instead of hoarding her success, she built bridges with it. Her wealth became a tool, not for luxury, but to lifting others. In South Africa, her Leadership Academy for Girls stands as a monument to what she never had, a safe place for a child to dream. She once said, "These girls are me. Every one of them is a version of who I could have been if someone had believed in me." She gave them what life had denied her: belonging, protection, possibility, and in doing so, she began to heal her own oldest wound, the feeling of being unwanted. Back in Montecito, her days now begin with silence, morning walks, meditation, gratitude. She says, "I finally know what peace feels like. It's not applause, it's quiet." The woman the world once saw as unbreakable was never made of steel. She was made of soil, resilient, rich, scarred, but alive. And now at 71, she's rooted not in fame or fortune, but in something deeper: forgiveness, purpose, and peace. From Mississippi's dust to Montecito's light, Oprah Winfrey didn't just survive, she transformed. And in the end, that is her greatest legacy. Not what she built, but how she healed, and how through her healing, she taught the world to believe that pain can bloom into purpose.
For nearly half a century, the world has watched Oprah Winfrey rise. From poverty to power, from pain to purpose. To millions, she is the embodiment of triumph. Proof that you can start with nothing and still touch the stars. But behind every shining moment lies the shadow of its cost. Because greatness, as her life reveals, is rarely born from comfort. It's forged in suffering. The world celebrated her wealth, her wisdom, her words. But what few saw was the woman beneath the crown, the one who carried the weight of expectation, grief, and endless giving. Every success she ever claimed came at the price of another wound healed only halfway. The child who learned pain before words grew into the woman who taught the world to speak. The girl who was silenced by shame became a voice for the broken. And the woman who once had no home built one not just for herself, but for thousands who needed a place to belong. But here lies the tragedy. Her victories were never born from joy. They were carved from scars. The world crowned her as its healer, but few asked how much of herself she lost in the process. At 71, she has everything one could dream of: peace, power, legacy. Yet there's a quiet ache in her eyes, a recognition that greatness never comes without loss. She once said, "The more you give, the more it costs you, but that's the price of purpose." Through every heartbreak, every headline, every triumph, Oprah carried her pain like a torch, lighting the way for others. Even when her own path was dark, she turned wounds into wisdom and sorrow into strength. But in doing so, she revealed one of life's cruelest truths, that sometimes the people who heal the world are the ones who bleed the most. So what is the tragedy of greatness? It's not the loneliness, it's not the struggle. It's knowing that every mountain you climb began as the valley that broke you. From the red dirt of Mississippi to the golden hills of Montecito, Oprah Winfrey's journey is not just the story of success, it's the story of survival. A woman who turned every wound into wisdom and proved that the darkest soil grows the brightest flowers. And maybe that is her final gift to the world, the reminder that even the most beautiful lives are born from pain.